Section 23 of Astounding Stories of Super Science, September 1930. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Richard Ellwood. Earth, the Marauder, by Arthur J.Burks. Chapter 20. Circa commands again. Ahead through the storms which still hung tenaciously to the roof of the world, flashed those dozen air cars of the moon. Now Circa could plainly see the dome of his laboratory, and from the depths of him welled up that strange glow which Earthlings recognize as the joy of returning home, than which there is none, save the love for a woman, greater. Now he could see the effect of those flares, or lights from Mars, which impinged on the face of the earth, though he could see no purpose in them, no reason for their being, since they seemed to do no damage at all, though the effect of them was weird in the extreme. Outer darkness rent with ripping, roaring storms. Flurries of ice, snow, and sleet, shot through and through by balls of lambent flames in unguessable numbers. Every light which struck the surface of the earth bounded away and, half a mile or so from the surface again, burst into flaming pinwheels like skyrockets of ancient times. Strange lights, causing weird effects but producing no damage at all, save to lessen to some extent the courage of Earthlings, because they did not understand these things. And always, down the ages, man had stood most in fear of the unknown. Circa peered off across the heavens, where a ball of flame now seemed to be rising over the horizon, and was amazed at the size of this planet. Mars was close to Earth, so close that, had they possessed air cars like those of the Moon people, which remained to be seen, they could easily have attacked the Earth. Across the face of the earth flashed those fiery will-o'-the-wisps from Mars, without rhyme or reason, yet Circa knew positively that they possessed some meaning, and that the earth had been forced thus close to Mars for a purpose. What that purpose was, must yet be discovered. Then, under the air cars, the laboratory of Circa. Down dropped the air cars to a landing near the laboratory, and to the cubes in the forepeak of each, Circa sent the mental command: "Assure yourselves that the air cars will remain where they are. Muster inside the laboratory, keeping well away from the master barrel." Then to the people who had returned, clothed in strange radiance, from the moon with Circa and with Jaska, he spoke: "Leave the cars and enter my laboratory, where further orders will be given you." With Jaska still by his side, Circa entered the laboratory through the exit dome. Inside, clothing was swiftly brought for the rebels, for Circa and for Jaska. But even when they were clothed, these people who had come back seemed to glow with an inner radiance which transfigured them. Circa the Second, his face drawn and pale, came from the observatory to meet his son, and the two were clasped in each other's arms for a moment. Circa the Second, who had looked no older than his son, seemed to have aged a dozen centuries in the time Circa had been gone. But it was not of the threatened attack by Martians that Circa the Second spoke. He made no statement. He merely asked a question. Was Lunar very beautiful, and just a bit unearthly in appearance? Circa started. Yes, beautiful, wondrously, fearfully beautiful. But I had the feeling that she had no heart or soul, no conscience, that she was somehow, well, bestial. A moan of anguish escaped Circa the Second. "Dalius again!" he ejaculated. "But much of the fault was mine. Before you were born, we scientists of Earth had already several times realized the necessity of expansion for the children of Earth, if they were to continue. Dalius's proposal to my father was discarded because it involved the wholesale taking of life. But after the oceans had been obliterated and the human family still outgrew its bounds, Dalius came to my father and me with still another proposal. It involved a strange, otherworldly young woman whom he called Lunar. Her family, well, nothing was known about her, for her family could not be traced. Wiped out, I presume, in some interfamily quarrel, leaving her alone. Dalius found her, took an interest in her, and the very strangeness of her gave him his idea, which he brought to my father and me. His proposal was somewhat like that which you made when we sent the Earth out of its orbit into outer space, save that Dalius's scheme involved no such program. His was simply a proposal to somehow communicate with the moon by the use of an interplanetary rocket that should carry a human passenger. He put the idea up to this girl, Lunar, and she did not seem to care one way or another. Dalius was all wrapped up in his ideas, and gave the girl the name of Lunar, as being symbolical of his plans for her. He coached and trained her against the consummation of his plan. We knew something, theoretically at least, about the conditions on the moon, and everything possible was done for her to make it feasible for her to exist on the moon. My error was in ever permitting the experiment to be made, since if I had negatived the idea, Dalius would have gone no further. But I, too, was curious, and Lunar did not care. Well, the rocket was constructed and shot outward into space by a series of explosions. No word was ever received from Lunar, though it was known that she landed on the moon. I say no word was ever received, yet what you have intimated proves that Dalius has either been in mental communication with her, hoping to induce her to send a force against the Earth, and assist him in mastering the Earth, overthrowing we Sarkas, or has been biding his time against something of the thing we have now accomplished. This seemed to clear up many things for Sarka, though it piled higher upon his shoulders the weight of his responsibilities. The otherworldliness of Lunar, now called Luar, explained her mastery of the gnomes, and through them the cubes, and her knowledge of the omnipotent qualities of the white flames of the moon's core, which might have been, it came to Sarka in a flash, the source of all life on the moon in the beginning. "But father," went on Sarka, "I don't see any sense in this aerial bombardment by Mars." "I believe," said Sarka the Second sadly, "that before another 10 hours pass we shall know the worst there is to be known. But now, son, instead of going back into attack against the moon, we go into battle against the combined forces of Mars and of the moon." Sarka now took command of the forces of the Earth. Swiftly he turned to the people of the Gens of Dalius who had come back with him. "You will be divided into 11 equal groups, as nearly as possible. Father, will you please arrange the division? Each group will be attached to the staff of one of the spokesmen of the Gens, so that each spokesman will have the benefit of your knowledge with reference to conditions on the moon. Each group will re-enter its particular air car, retaining control of the cube in each case, of course, and will at once repair to his proper station. Telepathy is the mode of communication with the cubes, and you rule them by your will. Each group, when assembled by my father, will choose a leader before quitting this laboratory, and such leader will remain in command of his group, under the overlordship of the spokesman to whom he reports with his group. You understand? Your loyalty is unquestioned. You will consecrate your lives to the welfare of the Gens to which you are going, since you no longer have a Gens of your own." Sarka turned to the cubes, which had formed in a line just inside the exit dome, and issued a mental command to the cube that had piloted his air car from the moon. The cube faded out instantly, appearing immediately afterward on the table of the varicolored lights. "Father," said Sarka, While I am issuing orders to the spokesman, please see if you can discover the secret of these cubes, how they are actuated, the real extent of their intelligence. The rest of you, with your cubes, depart immediately and report to your new gens." Within 10 minutes the divisions had been made, and the radiant people had entered the air cars, and, outside the laboratory, risen free of the earth, and turned, each in its proper direction, for the gens of its assignment. The Sarkas and Jaska watched them go. There remained but one air car, standing outside on half a dozen of those grim tentacles, with 2 tentacles swinging free, undulating to and fro like serpents, harnessed electricity actuating the tentacles, cars and tentacles subservient to the cubes. The air cars safely on their way, Sarka stepped to the master barrel, turned it down to normal speed, and signaled the spokesman of the gens. "The Moon and Mars are in alliance against us, and Dalis has allied himself and his gens with the ruler of the Moon. I don't know yet what form the attack will take, but know this, that the safety of the world, of all its people, rests in your hands, and that the war into which we are going is potentially more vast than expected when this venture began, and more devastating than the fight with the air cars of the Moon. Coming to you in air cars which we managed to take from the Moon people are such of the people of the gens of Dalis as were able to return with me. Question them. Gather all the information you can about them, and through them keep control of the cubes which pilot the air cars, for in the cubes, I believe, lies the secret of our possible victory in the fight to come." Sarka scarcely knew why he had spoken the last sentence. It was as though something deep within him had risen up, commanded him to speak, and deeper yet, far back in his consciousness, was a mental picture of the devastation he had witnessed on his flight above the area that had once housed the gens of Dalis. For in that ghastly area, he believed, was embodied an idea greater than more wanton destruction, just as there was an idea back in the fiery lights from Mars greater than mere display. Somehow the two were allied, and Sarka believed that, between the blue column and the fiery lights from Mars, the fate of the world rested. He could, he believed, by manipulation of the barrels that yet remained, maneuver the world away from that blue column, which on the earth was invisible. But to have done so would have thwarted the very purpose for which this mad voyage had begun. The world had been startled on its mad journey into space for the purpose of attacking and colonizing the Moon and Mars. The Moon had been colonized by the gens of Dalis, already in potential revolt against the Earth. Mars was next, and by forcing the Earth into close proximity to Mars, the people of the Moon had played into the hands of the Earth people. If the people of Earth were capable of carrying out the program of expansion originally proposed by Sarka. If they were not, well, Sarka thought somewhat grimly, the resultant cataclysmic war would at least solve the problem of overpopulation. Inasmuch as the Earth was already committed to whatever might transpire, Sarka believed he should take a philosophic view of the matter. Sarka turned to an examination of the master barrel, and even as he peered into the depths of it, he thought gratefully how nice it was to be home again, in his own laboratory, upon the world of his nativity. He even found it within his heart to feel somewhat sorry for Dalis, and to feel ashamed that he had, even in his heart, mistreated him. Then he thought, with a tightening of his jaw muscles, of the casual way in which Dalis had destroyed Sarka the First, of his forcing his people to undergo the terrors of the Lake of the White Flames, without telling them the simple secret of his betrayal of the Earth in his swift alliance with Luar, or Luar herself when, as Lunar, a strange waif of Earth, Dalis had sent her out as the first human passenger aboard a rocket to the Moon. All his pity vanished, though he still believed he had done right in sparing Dalias's life. Suddenly there came an ominous humming in the barrel, and simultaneously signals from the vari-colored lights on the table. Sarka whirled to the lights, noting their color, and mentally repeating the names of the spokesmen who signaled them. Even before he gave the signal that placed him in position to converse with them, he noted the strange coincidence. The spokesmen who desired speech with him were tutelary heads of the Gens, whose borders touched the devastated area where Dalis had but recently been overlord. An icy chill caressed his spine as he signaled the spokesman to speak. Yes, Vardi, Prul, Classer, Cleric. The report of each of them was substantially the same, though touched in different words, words freighted heavily with strange terror. The devastated area has suddenly broken into movement. Throughout that portion of it visible from my Gens area, the fused mass of debris is bubbling, fermenting, walking into life. An aura of unearthly menace seems to flow outward from this heaving mass, and the whole is assumed a most peculiar radiance, cold, gleaming, like distant starshine. Wait! Replied Sarka swiftly. Wait until the people I have sent you have arrived. Report to me instantly if the movement of the mass is noticeably augmented, and especially so if it seems to be breaking up, or coagulating into any sort of form whatever. Then he dimmed the lights, indicating that, for the moment, there was nothing more to be said. Just then his father, face very gray and very old, entered the room of the master barrel from the laboratory. Son, he said, the crisis is almost upon us. The Martians are coming. End of section 23. Recording by Richard Ellwood. Section 24 of Astounding Stories of Super Science, September 1930. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Richard Ellwood. Earth, the Marauder, by Arthur J.Burks. Chapter 21. Cubes of Chaos. Sarka raced into the observatory, wondering as he ran how the attack of the Martians would manifest itself, but scarcely prepared for the brilliant display which greeted his gaze. Compared to the oncoming flames from Mars, the preceding display of lights had been as nothing. The whole heavens between the Earth and Mars seemed alight with an unearthly glare, as though the very heart of the sun had burst and hurled part of its flaming mass outward into space. On it came with unbelievable speed. But there was no telling yet the form of the things which were coming. What are they? Whispered Jaska, standing fearlessly at Sarka's side. Interplanetary cars? Rockets? Balls of fire? Or beings of Mars? I think, said Sarka, after studying the display for a few minutes, that they are either rockets or fireballs, perhaps both together. But the Martians cannot consolidate any position on the Earth without coming to hand grips. Since they must know this, we can expect to see the people of Mars themselves when, or soon after, those balls of fire strike the Earth. Sarka raced back to the room of the master barrel as a strident humming came through to him. The spokesmen of the Gens, whose borders touched those of the devastated Dalis area, were reporting again, and their voices were high-pitched with fear that threatened to break the bounds of sanity. The ferment in the devastated area, was the gist of their report, is assuming myriads of shapes. The fused mass is broken up into isolated masses, and each mass of itself is assuming one of the many forms. What forms? Snapped Sarka. Quickly! Cubes! Thousands and millions of cubes, and the cubes themselves are forming into larger cubes, some square, some rectangular. In the midst of these formations are others, mostly columnar, each column consisting of cubes which have coalesced into the larger form from the same small cubes. The columnar formations are topped by globes, which emit an ethereal radiance. Listen! Sarka's voice was vibrant with excitement. "Spokesmen of the Gens, make sure that every individual member of your Gens is fully equipped with flying clothing, including belts and ovoids, prepared for an indefinite stay outside on the roof of the world. Get your people out swiftly, keeping them in formation. Keep about you these people of Dalius whom I sent you, and understand before you break contact with your barrels that instructions received from these people come from me. In turn, after you have quitted the hives, anything you wish to say to me you can repeat to any of the glowing people of the Dalius." The contacts were broken. Sarka stared into the barrel, glancing swiftly in all directions to see whether his orders were obeyed. Out of the myriads of hives were flying the people of all the Gens of Earth, their vast numbers already darkening the roof of the world. The advance fires from Mars seemed to have no effect on them, which Sarka had expected, since the fires seemed to consume nothing they had touched previously. By millions the people came forth, people dressed in the clothing of this Gens or that, wearing each the insignia of the house of his spokesman. A brave show. Sarka could see the faces of many, now in light, now in shadow, as the advance fires of Mars lighted them for a moment in passing, then left them in shadow as the bursting balls of fire faded and died. Strange, too, that the fireballs made no noise. Noiseless flame which rebounded from the surface of the earth broke in silence, deluging the heavens with shooting stars of great brilliance. Through its display flew the people of the Gens, mustering in flight above flight, each to his own level, under command of the spokesman of the Gens. "How long, Father," queried Sarka, "should it take to empty the Gens areas?" "The people of Earth have been waiting for word to go into battle since we first sent the people of Dalius against the Moon Men. They still are ready. The dwellings of our people, all of them, can be emptied within an hour." "I wonder," mused Sarka, "if that is soon enough." Perhaps yes, perhaps no. It would be a race in any case. Sarka divided his attention between the rapidly changing formations of the moon cubes in that devastated area and the onrushing charge of the fireballs from Mars. All were visible to him through the master barrel and from the observatory, though the Martian fireballs were now so close that the vanguard of them could be seen even in the master barrel, adjusted to view only activities on the surface of the Earth. Even as the last flights of the Gens of Earth were slipping into the icy air from the roof of the world, the moon cubes began their terrifying, appalling attack, every detail of which could be seen by Sarka from the master barrel. Those columns, composed of cubes, seemed to be the leaders of a vast cube army. The top of each of them was a gleaming globe whose eerie light played over the country immediately surrounding each column, their weird light reflected in the squares, rectangles, and globes that other cubes had formed. Sarka sought swiftly among the columns for the one which might conceivably be in supreme command, but even as he sought, the moon cubes moved to the attack. The globes on the tops of the columns dimmed their lights, and the squares, rectangles, and globes got instantly into terrible motion. Southward, from the position in which they had formed, they began to move, the squares and rectangles apparently sliding along the surface of the scarred and broken soil, the globes rolling. Southward there was the vast wall of the Gens that bordered the devastated area in that direction, and the cube army was instantly at full charge toward this, in what Sarka realized was to be the war of demolition. Within a minute, Sarka was conscious of a trembling of all the laboratory, and the eyes of Jaska were wide with fear. Swiftly the trembling grew, until sound now was added to the vast, awesome tremor, a vast, roaring crescendo of sound that mounted and mounted as the speed of the cube army increased. The vanguard of the cube army struck the dwelling of the Gens southward of that of Dalius, and a mighty, rocketing roar sounded in the master barrel, was audible inside the laboratory, even without the aid of the barrel, at whose surface Sarka stared as a man fascinated, hypnotized. The cube army struck the dwellings, disappeared into them as though they had been composed of tissue paper, and continued on. Over the tops of the cube army toppled the roofs of the dwellings, there in the midst of the cubes, to be ground to powder with a sound as of a million avalanches grinding together in some awesome sun-size valley. Southward, in the wake of the chaotic charge, moved a mighty gigantic crevice, whose sides were the walls of the hives left standing. And still the cube army moved on, grinding everything it touched to dust, trampling buildings into nothingness, destroying utterly along a front hundreds of miles wide, and as deep as the dwellings of men. "God!" cried Circa, his voice so tense that both his father and Jaska heard it above the roaring which shook and rocked the world. "Do you see? The moon cubes are destroying the dwelling of our people, and the Martians are to destroy the people who have fled." "There must be a way," said Sarka the Second quietly, "to circumvent the cubes. But what? Your will still rules the cubes which piloted you from the moon?" "Yes," replied Sarka tersely, "but there are only a dozen of the cubes. What can they do against countless millions of them? Cubes which are moon cubes brought to the earth in the heart of that blue column, here reformed to create an army which is invincible, because it cannot be slain? It means that the moon people themselves, thousands of miles out of reach, have but to sit in comfort and watch their cube slaves destroy us. When they have laid waste the earth, the Martians have but to finish the fight." "If, beloved," said Jaska, "your will commands those 12 cubes, it can also command all the others, for they must be essentially the same. Call on the rebels of Dalius to help you." "Then what of the spokesmen of the Gens, who will be out of contact with me?" "They must stand on their own feet, must fight their own battle. Call to you the people who have passed through the white flames, and fight with the distant will of Luar and of Dalius for control of the cube army." Again that exultation which convinced him he could move mountains with his two hands coursed through the being of Sarka. Quietly he answered Jaska. "I believe you are right," he said softly. "Those of us who have passed through the flames which bore these moon cubes will control the cubes, even bend them to our will. The spokesman must vanquish the Martians or perish." Then he sent his mental commands to the spokesman. "Meet the Martians when they arrive and destroy or drive them back. You live only if you win. We speak no more until victory is ours. People of the Gens of Dalius, go to the areas being devastated by the cubes, taking your cubes and air cars with you, and I will join you there. And Jaska with me." Sarka had not himself mentally spoken the last 4 words. Jaska had thought spoken them, before he could prevent. He turned upon her, lips shaping a command that she remain behind, but she forestalled him. "I, too, have been through the white flames. You may have need of all of us." End of section 24. Recording by Richard Ellwood. Section 25 of Astounding Stories of Super Science, September 1930. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Richard Ellwood. Earth, the Marauder, by Arthur J.Burks. Chapter 22. The Struggle for Mastery. The people of all the Gens of Earth were now between 2 fires. The cube army, ruled by the mistress of the moon, was laying waste the dwellings of the Gens, destroying them with a speed and surety of which no earthquake, whatever its proportions, would have been capable. The Gens were forced out upon the roof of the world, where scarcely had they maneuvered into their prearranged formations than the Martians struck. Those huge balls of fire, larger even than the air cars of the moon, landed in vast and awe-inspiring numbers on the roof of the world, landed easily, with no apparent effort or shock. The light of them made all the world a place of vast radiance, save only that portion which was being destroyed by the cube army, and this area had a cold, chill radiance of its own. By groups and organizations, the fireballs of Mars landed and rested quiescent on the surface of the globe. Sarka, pausing only long enough in his laboratory to study this strange attack and to discover how it would get underway, was at the same time preparing to go forth to take his own strange part in the defensive action of the Earthlings. A vast confidence was in him. "We will lose millions of people, Father," he said softly, "but it will end in our victory, in the most glorious war ever fought on this earth." "That is true, my son," replied the older man sadly. For several minutes the vast fireballs, which seemed to be monster glowing octagons, rested where they had landed, and even the gens of the people were closing on them, bringing their ray detectors and atom disintegrators into action. Then, when the Earthlings would have destroyed the first vast fireballs, and Sarka was noting that the flames which bathed the balls seemed to have no effect whatever on Earthlings, save to outline them in mantles of fire, the fireballs wakened to new life. They opened like the halves of peaches falling apart, and out upon the roof of the world poured the first Martians Earth had ever seen. They were more than twice the size, on average, of Earth people. At first glance seemed to resemble them very much, save that their eyes, which each Martian was possessed of two, were set on the ends of long tentacles, which could stretch forth to a length of 2 feet or more from the eye sockets, and thus be turned in any direction. Each eye was independent of its neighbor, as one could look forward while the other looked backward, or one look right while the other looked left. Each Martian possessed 2 arms on each side of a huge, powerful torso, and legs that were like the boils of trees, compared to the slender limbs of Earthlings. All the Martians seemed to be dressed in the skins of strange, varicolored beasts. Each carried in his upper right hand a slender cane-like thing that some 3 feet in length, from whose tip there flashed those spurts of flame which had puzzled the Earth people before the actual launching of the attack. Beyond these weapons, the Martians seemed to possess no weapons of offense at all, nor of defense. "With our ray detectors and atom disintegrators," said Sarka, moving into the exit dome with Jaska, "we can blast them from the face of the Earth." But in a moment he realized he had spoken too hastily. The nearest fireball was, of course, within the area of the gens of Cleric, and Sarka could see with his naked eyes all that transpired. The Martian passengers, who moved swiftly away from their fireball vehicles. Then a flight of the gens of Cleric descended upon the fireball and its fleeing passengers, with tiny ray detectors and atom disintegrators held to the fore, ready for action. The Martians, at some distance from their glowing vehicle, paused and formed a ragged line, facing the ball, staring at the descending people of the gens of Cleric, their tentacle-like eyes waving to and fro, oddly like the tentacles of those air cars of the moon. The flight was hovering above the first fireball. In a second row, at the command of an underling, the ray detectors would destroy fireball and Martians as thoroughly as though they had never existed at all. But then a strange thing happened. At that exact moment, timing their actions to fractions of seconds, the Martians raised and pointed their cane-like weapons of the spurting flames. They pointed them, however, not at the Earthlings, but at the fireball which had brought them to Earth. Instantly the fireball exploded as with the roaring of 100 mighty volcanoes, and the descending flights of the gens of Cleric was blasted into countless fragments. Bits of them flew in all directions. Many dropped, the mangled, infinitesimal remains of them, down to the roof of the Earth, while many were hurled skyward through formations above them, while those formations, to a height of a full 2 miles, were broken asunder. Many flights above that first flight were smashed and broken, their individual members hurled in all directions by that one single blast of a single fireball. Individuals who escaped destruction were hurled end over end, upward through other flights higher above, and the whole aggression of flights which had been concentrated on that first fireball was instantly demoralized, while full 50% of its individuals were instantly torn to bits. Sarka groaned in the depths of him. The leader of the Martians, or the master who sent them here to win. For they do not win, they cannot return to Mars, as they will have destroyed their vehicles. Their confidence is superhuman. Have faith in the courage of Earthlings, son, said Sarka. It was much to ask, for if one single of these fireballs could wreak such havoc with the people of Earth, what would the destruction by the countless other unexploded fireballs of the Martians? Still, the spokesmen themselves must discover a way to hold their own, to win against the Martians. For Sarka, there was greater work to do. He must oppose the wills of Luar and of Dalis in a mighty mental conflict which would decide whether the homes of men would be saved or utterly destroyed by the moon cubes. But as he left through the exit dome with Jaska by his side, he shuddered, and was just a little sick inside as he saw the fearful result of that first explosion of a Martian fireball. Bits of human wreckage were scattered over the earth for a great distance in all directions from where the fireball had exploded, and at that spot a gigantic crater had been torn in the roof of the world, going down to none knew what depths. Even the Martians here, only to consolidate positions which had passed the demolition of the moon cubes, were capable of demolitions almost as ghastly and complete as those of the cubes. The sound was incapable of being described, for outside the laboratory the sound of the advance of the moon cubes eating into the dwellings of men, tumbling them down, grinding them to powder, was cataclysmic in its mighty volume. 1,000,000 express trains crashing head on into walls of galvanized iron at top speed simultaneously. Eardrum crashing blows as fireballs exploded, the screams and shrieks of maimed and dying Earthlings, of Earthlings unwounded but possessed of abysmal fear. Then, resolutely, Sarka turned his back on the conflict between the Martians and the people of Earth, and hurtled across the devastated roof of the world toward that area which was feeling the destructive force of the Vandal cube army. As he flew, Jaska keeping pace with him in silence, his mind was busy. Passage through the white flames of the moon had given him the key. Those white flames, source of all life on the moon, rendered almost godlike those whom it bathed, gave them unbelievable access of mental brilliance, were the source of that blue column which had forced the Earth outward toward Mars, were the source, in some way, of the cubes themselves, as he and Jaska, after passing through them, owed their own near divinity to the same white flames. Those flames had made Luar mistress of the moon, therefore of the gnomes and of the cubes. Therefore Sarka, having been bathed in the flames, should make himself master of the cubes if he could outwill the combined determinations of Luar and of Dalis. His confidence was supreme as he fled through the outer darkness toward the eerie light which came from the area of demolitions. Looking ahead, he could see tiny glows in the sky, which he knew to be the rebels of Dalius's Gens, flying to keep their rendezvous with him. Higher mounted his courage and his confidence as he approached the roaring crash, perpetual and always mounting, which showed him where the cube army was busiest. The sound vibrated the very air, causing the bodies of Sarka to tingle with it, causing them to flutter and shake in their flight with its awesome power. But they did not hold back, flew onward through the gloom, leaving behind them the brightly lighted areas where the Gens of Earth battled with the fireballs of the Martians, moving into the area of the eerie glowing of the cubes. Just as he approached the spot where mighty dwellings were tumbling before the march of the cube army, he sent a single command toward the cube which had piloted him from the moon. Come to me on the edge of the crevice nearest the place of most destruction. Would the cube now be subservient to his will? He wondered. Everything depended upon that. If not, then he might as well try to stay the forces of a mighty avalanche with his breath as halt the cube army with his will. But, strangely enough, the closer he came to the vast area of tumbling dwellings, the calmer he became, the more sure that he would win against the cubes. For when he landed at the lip of the crevice, across which he could look for 100 miles, a single cube gleamed brightly almost at his feet, awaiting his orders. One, by twos, threes, fours, dozens, came the glowing people who had been bathed in the white flames of the moon's life source, and each dropped down beside him. Circa gave a command. Drop down in the midst of the cubes. Make your own cube the rallying point for this vast army of cubes. Force the cubes to desist in their mighty destruction. Be subservient to your will, and do you, each of you, be subservient to my will. Away dropped the rebels, glowing points of white flame, dropping down the sides of the crevice, a mighty, awesome canyon, into the very heart of the activity of the cubes, and from the brain of Circa, aided by the will of Jaska, went forth a simple command. Cease your march of destruction, O moon cubes, and hearken to the will of Circa, your master. Draw back from your labors and muster, not as squares, rectangles, and columns, but as individual cubes, in the area already devastated by you. Rally about the glowing people who have passed through the flames which were your moon mother, and wait for orders. Take no further heed of commands from Dalius and Luar. Instantly it seemed to Circa that he had drawn into some invisible vortex which tore at his brain, and his body, at his soul. Inside, a cold voice seemed to say, Fool Circa, my will is greater than yours. But though the force of the will of Luar, whose thought he recognized, tore at him, almost shriveled the soul and brain of him with its might, he continued to send his thought command out to the moon cubes, forcing it through the wall of Luar's will, hurtling like invisible projectiles at the cube army below. Exaltation possessed him, buoyed him up, gave him greater courage and confidence as the moments passed, for even as his being concentrated on the will command to the cubes, his senses told him that the mighty sound of destruction was dying away, fading out. Slower now the dwellings fell. Slower moved the moon cubes, and as they slowed in their mighty march through the dwellings of men, so increased the confidence, the power of will, of Circa and his people, the rebels of the Gens of Dalius. Then, after an hour whose mighty mental conflict had bathed Circa in the perspiration of superhuman effort, the sound of destruction ceased altogether, and the dwellings ceased to fall. A silent shout, like an inborn paean of rejoicing, surged through Circa as he noted the retreat from the dwellings of men, of the moon cubes. Back and back retreated the squares and the rectangles, the columns and the globes, breaking apart as they retreated. Within 15 minutes after the destructions had ceased, millions of gleaming cubes winked upward from the bottom of the crevice, motionless, quiescent. Circa sent forth another thought. I am your master, O cubes of the moon. No sound, no movement answered him. Luar and Dalius are no longer able to command you. Still no sound or movement of the cubes. Then, taking a deep breath, as of a swimmer preparing to dive into icy water, Circa gave a new command. Dissolve! Reform on the roof of the world in globes! Roll over the face of the earth! Destroy the fireballs of Mars and take prisoners inside the globes! The attackers from Mars! Instantly the gleaming cubes vanished, and darkness as of a mighty pit possessed the crevice of destruction. Then, at the lip of the great crevice, the cubes swept into form, myriads of globes which gleamed with the cold blue brilliance of the moon. They had no sooner formed as globes than they were in action again, rolling over the roof of the world as with a rising crescendo of thunder tumbling down the night black sky. So mighty was their rush that the roof of the world trembled and shook. Above their charge raced Sarka and Jaska, and with them the rebels of the Gens of Dalis. All were present when the cubes crashed into the fireballs from Mars, swept the Martians within themselves as prisoners, held them securely, and continued on, destroying the fireballs in myriads. Here and there fireballs exploded on contact, destroying the globes, which immediately reformed again as though the explosions had not been felt at all. Sarka had won the allegiance of the moon cubes, which had defeated and taken prisoners the Martians, destroying the vehicles in which they might have returned to Mars. And as realization came, darkness settled over the roof of the world. The last flare of Mars faded and died. This done, the cubes formed in mighty rows, facing the laboratory of Sarka. His heart beating madly with exaltation, Sarka studied them. Then he stepped into the observatory, gazed away across the space which separated the Earth from the moon, sent a menial message winging outward. Luar, Dalis. Faintly, fearfully, came the answer. We hear, O Sarka. Shift the blue column away from the Earth. Do not interfere as we return to our orbit about the sun. Obey, or I combine the total wreckage of Mars, the Earth, and the Moon in an attack against you and your Martian ally. Inform your ally that their people will not return, that the Earth has need of them, but that 2 Gens of Earth will be received by Martians in perfect amity, and these Gens allowed biding places on Mars. Unless your ally obeys, the Martian in my hands will be destroyed. In an hour the answer came, the snarling thought answer of Dalis. We hear, we obey, but Dalis is never beaten while he lives. His day will come. Sarka found himself feeling even a little sorry for the sorely beaten Dalis, but his face was grim as he sent another command to the people of Dalis who had passed through the life source of the moon. Take command of the cubes and force them to repair the damage which has been done to the dwellings of men, to repair them completely over all the face of the Earth. As the glowing people hurried to obey, Sarka softly asked his father, But what shall we do with the Martians? Sarka II smiled. Release them, and send them to the lowest level, where, guarded by the cubes, they will be sent constructing fireballs like those in which they arrived for the use of Earth, if Dalis or the Martians ever attack again. And son... Yes, O my father, asked Sarka softly. I have another suggestion for the employment of the cubes. Let them build air cars to be used by the Gens of Prul and of Klasser as transportation to Mars whenever you are ready for them to go. Sarka smiled boyishly, happily. Yes, O my father. And is there anything else? Yes. Take Jaska as your mate. Do you not see that she is waiting for you to speak? Sarka turned to Jaska, whose face was glorious in her surrender, and whose lips were parted in a loving smile, which faded only when Sarka's lips caressed it away. The end. End of section 25. Recording by Richard Ellwood.
Section 26. The Reader's Corner. From Astounding Stories of Super Science, September 1930. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by BellonaTimes. The Reader's Corner. A meeting place for readers of astounding stories. From Australia. Dear Editor, I am taking the privilege of writing to you in an endeavor to show my appreciation of your magazine, Astounding Stories. Although I am an inveterate reader, I must say that I have never read any book or magazine to come up to the above, and confess that though I am ignorant of the intricacies of science, and lacked interest in same prior to my reading your first issue, same is described so plainly that I have no trouble in fully understanding exactly what the author conveys. I must thank you for this other interest in the monotony of life. Have pleasure of informing you that through my enthusiasm have created several subscribers, and on occasions when adopting the age-old custom of placing my foot upon the rail and bending the elbow, have entered into many a conversation and discussion re the different stories included in your magazine. I assure you of my whole-hearted support in the furthering of the popularity of your enjoyable and unique work in my country, and wish you every success in your venture. M. B. Johnson, Melbourne, Australia. Mr. Neal's Favorites. Dear Editor, the other day I saw Astounding Stories on one of the newsstands. I purchased it, and after reading Brigands of the Moon, I eagerly finished the rest of the magazine. I did not like Out of the Dreadful Depths. In my opinion, it should not be in a science fiction magazine. The only thing the matter with your magazine is that it is too small. I would like to read some stories in our magazine by Ed Earl Rep, David H. Keller, M.D., Miles J. Breuer, M.D., and Stanton Coblentz. Francis Neal, Kokomo, Indiana. No Ghost Stories. Dear Editor, I received your April issue, and I think it is the best yet. I have but one complaint to make, and that is your magazine seems to print some good science stories, but also has some stories which do not belong in a science fiction magazine. They might come under the name of Weird Tales. Is your magazine devoted to pure 100% science fiction? If so, I think you ought to leave out the ghost stories. Louis Wentzler, Brooklyn, New York. From The Other Sex. Dear Editor, you'll be surprised to hear from a girl, as I notice only boys wrote to praise your new magazine. I tried reading some of the science fiction magazines my brother buys every month, but I'd start reading a story only to leave it unfinished. But your magazine is different. When I picked it up to read it, I thought I'd soon throw it down and read something else. But the moment I started to read one of the stories of your new magazine, I read it to the finish. I never read such vivid and exciting stories. Even my brother, who loves all kinds of science fiction magazines, couldn't stop praising your new magazine. He said Astounding Stories beats them all. Some of your readers criticized your new magazine, and I haven't anything but disagreement for them. Yet who am I to judge persons who have read and know all about science fiction? Will recommend your new magazine to all my friends. Sue O'Bara, Chicago, Illinois. January issue was first. Dear Editor, I have just finished reading the April issue of Our magazine. Can mere words describe my feelings? I am classing the stories as follows: A. Excellent. B. Very good. C. Good. D. Passable. E. Poor. A. Monsters of Moyen, Vampires of Venus, The Ray of Madness, The Soul Snatcher. B. The Man Who Was Dead. C, none. D, none. E, none. Brigands of the Moon is getting more and more interesting. Can you please tell me which month's issue was the first one, as I didn't procure the first 2 copies and should like to do so? Eli Meltzer, Brooklyn, New York. Eclipses All. Dear Editor, just as soon as your new magazine came out, I espied it. It eclipsed all the other magazines on the stand. As a cub magazine, I couldn't ask for more. I am going to comment on your stories now because I know you want me to, for I know you would like to know what sort of stories your readers like. I have a lot to say about Ray Cummings. He is the best writer I have ever seen. His stories couldn't be beat. Phantoms of Reality was a corking good story, but I believe his new serial, Brigands of the Moon, is going to be better. Captain S.P. Meek is a very good writer also. I take immense joy in his Dr. Bird stories. And we must not forget that great writer, Murray Leinster. His stories are really good. I congratulate you on your new magazine, Mr. Editor. Albert Philbrook, Springfield, Ohio. A Unique Magazine. Dear Editor, I've been trying to write your magazine for a long time, so here goes. I've bought every copy from the first issue and sure think it is a good magazine. In fact, I should say a unique magazine. There are but few magazines in its class among science fiction magazines. The stories come up to the standards of good science fiction, and some go far above it. A few stories I did not like were The Man Who Was Dead, The Soul Snatcher, The Corpse on the Grating, and The Stolen Mind. The science in all these stories was very poor, but your magazine became better in my eyes when you published Phantoms of Reality, Tanks, Old Crompton's Secret, Brigands of the Moon, Monsters of Moyen, and all of Captain S. P. Meek's stories. These were extraordinarily good stories. Wesso's drawings are very good, and I hope you keep him. I have seen his drawings in another magazine for quite a time. I don't like the illustrations of your other artist. Could you, by chance, secure an artist by the name of Leo Morey or Hugh MacKay? They both illustrate for other science fiction magazines and are about as good as Wesso. Please keep the latter, and why don't you have him do all of your illustrating? Sorry to seem such a grouch, but I don't like your grade of paper either. And why not enlarge the magazine to about 11 by 9 by 1/2 inch, and charge 25 cents for your thoroughly good magazine, apart from the defects I have mentioned. About your authors. They are, for the most part, good, but they are mostly amateurs at writing science fiction stories. I am delighted to see such expert writers of science fiction as Harl Vincent, Ray Cummings, Victor Rousseau, and Captain S. P. Meek writing for your magazine. But couldn't you include in your staff of authors A. Hyatt Verrill, Dr. Miles J. Breuer, Dr. David H. Keller, R. F. Starzl, and a few more such notable authors? I hope to see these authors in your magazine soon. Linus Hogenmiller, Farmington, Missouri. The Star System. Dear Editor, 1 star means fairly good, 2 stars good, 3 stars excellent, 4 extraordinary, no stars, just another story. I give Brigands of the Moon by Ray Cummings 3 stars. The Atom Smasher by Victor Rousseau 3 stars. Murder Madness by Murray Leinster 2 stars. Into the Ocean Depths by S. P. Wright 2 stars. And The Jovian Jest by L. Lorraine no stars. It was short and sweet. Wesso sure can draw. I would like to see a full-page illustration for each story by him. My favorite type of stories are interplanetary, and, second favorite, stories of future wars. Will you have many of them in the future? I like long stories like the novelette in the May issue of Astounding Stories. Jack Darrow, Chicago, Illinois. We expect not to. Dear Editor: While going over The Reader's Corner of the April issue, I notice in your answer to one of the letters that you will avoid reprints. Now, many of your readers have not read the older classics of science fiction. Would it not be a good idea to publish a reprint at least once a year? One of the suggestions given was Margarit's Through the Dragon Glass. Another very interesting story, and one that I am sure almost all of your followers have not read, is The Blind Spot by Homer Flint. I like the idea of having 3 members to a volume, as it will be much easier to bind. Now, starting with the April issue, I think that the best story in there is Monsters of Moyen. The Ray of Madness was up to the usual standard of Captain S. P. Meek's stories. The Man Who Was Dead was fairly good. Average, I would say. I did not like Vampires of Venus. I say that the May issue was the best of the Astounding stories. I was satisfied with every story in it. Into the Ocean Depths was the best story, The Atom Smasher being a close second. I liked the way the story Into the Ocean Depths ended. A slight trace of sadness, and not at all like the "and they lived happily ever after" ending. A real story. I was disappointed in not finding any story concerning Dr. Bird in the April issue. Will any more be printed soon? Before I close, I would like a definite answer to this question. Will you ever, or in the near future, reprint any of the genre of science fiction stories by the late master Garrett P. Serviss, or from the pen of A. Merritt or H. G. Wells? Nathan Greenfield, New York City. Again, reprints. Dear Editor: Although I am a reader of 6 science fiction magazines, I was more than glad to see the latest one out, Astounding Stories. Because the stories are all interesting, I consider Astounding Stories superior to most of the science fiction periodicals on the newsstands today. My favorite stories are those of interplanetary voyages and other worlds. My favorite authors are Ray Cummings, A. Merritt, Victor Rousseau, Murray Leinster, Arthur J. Burks, and Harl Vincent. I hope that you will soon have stories by Edmund Hamilton and David H. Keller. Now, here is something I hope you will give some thought and consideration. I notice that many of the readers wrote in requesting reprints. I am one of those who would like to see you publish some reprints, especially stories by Edgar Rice Burroughs, A. Merritt, and Ray Cummings. These authors have written many masterpieces of science fiction. It is very difficult, if not impossible, for a person to get these stories. They could be made available easily if Astounding Stories would reprint them. Most of the readers who object to reprints do so because they would hate to see a story by H. G. Wells or Jules Verne. I, myself, do not like these authors as they are too dull, but if you have only reprints by the 3 authors I mentioned and a few other popular writers, I am sure all the readers would welcome them. At least you could have a vote and see how they stand on reprints. Michael Fogaris, Passaic, New Jersey. Likes The Reader's Corner. Dear Editor: Your The Reader's Corner interests me very much. It surely does show how your magazine pleases its readers. You cannot get too much science in your stories to suit me. Chemistry and physics more than anything else. I surely enjoyed reading Mad Music and The Thief of Time. I don't like long stories. They are too interesting to have to wait a month for the next part. I hope that your magazine continues to have as astounding stories as it has in the past. Vern L. Einrich, Casey, Illinois. From Master Wiener. Dear Editor: One day coming home from school I saw your magazine. That night I bought it and have since been an ardent reader. But why not give us a change? I prefer stories of the Sargasso Sea, the Maelstrom, and about invasions of the earth. Milton Weiner, age 12, Baltimore, Maryland. High praise. Dear Editor: Enclosed you will find 20 cents in stamps for the first copy of Astounding Stories. I have just finished the May issue of Astounding Stories, and the rating of the stories is 1. Brigands of the Moon, excellent. 2. The Atom Smasher, marvelous. 3. Murder Madness, perfect. 4. Into the Ocean Depths, good. 5. The Jovian Jest, pretty good. The cover designed by H. Wesso is good. Don't lose him. I would like more stories by Victor Rousseau and Ray Cummings. Where are some stories by H. G. Wells, Stanton Coblentz, Gawain Edwards, Francis Flagg, Henrik Jarve, and Dr. Keller? My favorite stories are interplanetary stories. Here are some things that may improve your magazine, though I must say that your magazine is about perfect as it is. More pictures in long stories. About 2 novelettes in each issue. About 2 short stories in each issue. More interplanetary novels and novelettes. About 1 serial in 1 issue. Smoother paper. Isidore Horowitz, New York City. Fairly good satire. Dear Editor: I have read your 2 issues of Astounding Stories, and I feel that they will fill a very much needed place in literature. I am especially interested in the stories like The Vampires of Venus and The Brigands of the Moon. The Vampires of Venus can be classified as a fairly good satire on Earth beings. I consider that story one with a moral. It reminds one of Voltaire's Micromegas, and its taking us to another planet to show us our faults at home will stimulate interest in social improvement. I have kept tab on Edgar Rice Burroughs' writings because he teaches evolution in a way that makes it easy for the ordinary reader to grasp. You have a great field, if you can keep up the interplanetary stories and mix some evolutionary stories with them. The true stories are playing a valuable part in stimulating people to take a deeper view of life, and you have a field in Astounding Stories almost without a competitor. J. L. Stark, Louisville, Kentucky. He is H. W. Wesolowski. Dear Editor: Since I have read every copy of Astounding Stories since it was inaugurated, I feel well qualified to contribute a few bouquets and also some criticism. The cover illustrations are wonderful, but I cannot find the artist's name on it. So good an artist should put his moniker on his productions. I am glad to see that the words Super Science are on the top of the cover in bright red letters. Some other science fiction magazines seem desirous of disguising the contents of their magazines for some obscure and mysterious reason. And now a brickbat. It is my humble opinion that the science should be examined more carefully before the stories are printed in this excellent magazine. The stories should be not only astounding, but should contain some science information that will be remembered after the fiction is forgotten. The Man Who Was Dead is an excellent ghost story or weird tale, but is out of place in Our magazine. I take the liberty to call it Our magazine since a department is given over to the readers and we express our choice of the kind of stories that are printed. However, taken altogether, Our magazine is steadily improving. Each issue up to now has been distinctly better than the one before. I have graded the stories in the April and May copies as follows: excellent, Vampires of Venus, The Ray of Madness, Brigands of the Moon, Murder Madness, Into the Ocean's Depths, and The Jovian Jest. Good, Monsters of Moyen, The Atom Smasher, and The Soul Searcher. Poor, The Man Who Was Dead. My favorite authors are Dr. David H. Keller, Harl Vincent, Lilith Lorraine, Anthony Pelcher, Captain S. P. Meek, Dr. Miles J. Breuer, and Ray Cummings. I can hardly wait a month for my next copy. Wayne D. Bray, Campbell, Missouri. Story says Cro-Magnons fled to Europe. Dear Editor: Ever since I was first introduced to Astounding Stories by a cousin, I have been a steady reader. I have not missed a single issue so far. I hope you will have stories by Hyatt Verrill, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Edmund Hamilton, Leslie Stone, Stanton A. Coblentz, and Francis Flagg. The stories I like best in each issue, not counting serials, are Phantoms of Reality, Spawn of the Stars, Vandals of the Stars, Vampires of Venus, and The Atom Smasher. In The Atom Smasher, it says that all Europeans descended from the Atlanteans. Now when the hero killed them all with the disintegrating ray, would he not have affected their birth? Wesso is some artist. I saw a mistake on the cover of the March issue. The color of space is a deep black, not blue, because the blue color of the heavens when viewed from the earth is due to the reflection of light by the atmosphere. George Brand, Schenectady, New York. The Reader's Corner. All readers are extended a sincere and cordial invitation to come over in The Reader's Corner and join in our monthly discussion of stories, authors, scientific principles, and possibilities, everything that's of common interest in connection with our Astounding Stories. Although from time to time the editor may make a comment or so, this is a department primarily for readers, and we want you to make full use of it. Likes, dislikes, criticisms, explanations, roses, brickbats, suggestions, everything's welcome here. So come over in the Reader's Corner and discuss it with all of us. The Editor. Number 1. Editor's Note. The Forgotten Planet, July 1930 issue of Astounding Stories. Number 2. Mr. Bond has made a laughable error in his description. Like all of the Coleoptera, the Mercurians were hexapoda, six-legged. What Mr. Bond continually refers to in his narrative as upper arms were really the antennae of the insects, which split at the end into 4 flexible appendages resembling fingers. His mistake is a natural one, for the Mercurians use their antennae as extra arms. James S. Carpenter. End of section 26. Section 27. Astounding Stories Addenda. By Various. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. Reading by BellonaTimes. Astounding Stories of Super Science. On sale the first Thursday of each month. W. M. Clayton, Publisher. Harry Bates, Editor. Dr. Douglas M. Dold, Consulting Editor. The Clayton Standard on a magazine guarantees that the stories therein are clean, interesting, vivid, by leading writers of the day, and purchased under conditions approved by the Authors League of America. That such magazines are manufactured in union shops by American workmen. That each newsdealer and agent is insured a fair profit. That an intelligent censorship guards their advertising pages. The other Clayton magazines are Ace High Magazine, Ranch Romances, Cowboy Stories, Clues, 5 Novels Monthly, All-Star Detective Stories, Rangeland Love Story Magazine, Western Adventures, and Forest and Stream. More than 2 million copies required to supply the monthly demand for Clayton magazines. Volume 3, Number 3. Contents, September 1930. Cover design, H. W. Wesolowski. Painted in watercolors from a scene in Marooned Under the Sea. A Problem in Communication. Miles J. Breuer, M.D. Page 293. The delivery of his country into the clutches of a merciless, ultra-modern religion can be prevented only by Dr. Hagstrom's deciphering an extraordinary code. Jetta of the Lowlands, Ray Cummings, page 310. Fantastic and sinister are the lowlands into which Philip Grant descends on his dangerous assignment. Beginning a 3-part novel. The Terrible Tentacles of L472, Sewell Wright, page 332. Commander John Hanson of the Special Patrol Service records another of his thrilling interplanetary assignments. Marooned Under the Sea, Paul Ernst, page 346. 3 men stick out a strange and desperate adventure among the incredible monsters of the dark sea floor. A complete novelette. The Murder Machine, Hugh B. Cave, page 377. 4 lives laid helpless before the murder machine, the uncanny device by which hypnotic thought waves are filtered through men's minds to mold them into murdering tools. The Attack from Space, Captain S. P. Meek, page 390. From a far world came monstrous invaders who were all the more terrifying because invisible. Earth, the Marauder, Arthur J. Burks, page 408. Martian fireballs and the terrific moon cubes wreak tremendous destruction on helpless Earth in the final death struggle of the warring worlds. Conclusion. The Reader's Corner, All of Us, page 423. A meeting place for readers of Astounding Stories. Single copies, 20 cents. In Canada, 25 cents. Yearly subscription, $2. Issued monthly by Publishers Fiscal Corporation, 80 Lafayette Street, New York, New York. W. M. Clayton, President. Nathan Goldman, Secretary. Entered as second-class matter December 7, 1929, at the Post Office at New York, New York, under Act of March 3, 1879. Title registered as a trademark in the U.S. Patent Office. Member Newsstand Group, Men's List. For advertising rates, address E. R. Crow & Company, Incorporated, 25 Vanderbilt Avenue, New York, or 225 North Michigan Avenue, Chicago. End of Section 27. End of Astounding Stories of Super Science.